Thank you very much for the invitation, conference organizers, Kashan Prasad and others. I'm sure my colleague Gabriel should be there around. They have been running these conferences over 9 years now. I'm speaking from Glasgow. It is about 8 o'clock in the morning. So I'm going to spend 30 minutes talking about qualitative research, how qualitative research can be conducted under the new normal. I'm talking about qualitative research because that is my expertise, and all of my PhD students here in Glasgow are doing qualitative case studies for their PhDs. And in the last 35 years, I have been conducting qualitative case studies mainly in developing countries to understand how management accounting, management control, governance, accountability are socially, culturally, politically, historically constructed. But the question now is that we have a challenge because of the post-pandemic world we are now approaching. Hence, in my presentation today, I'm going to address these 3 important questions. What we mean by the new normal? What is qualitative research for you to understand? And how do we do it possibly differently under the context of the new normal? Firstly, the new normal. Now we have experienced the COVID-19 pandemic. It has given massive problems for us. Hence, it has massive implications for the nature of the work we do, even in research, in teaching, in our everyday life. Hence, we have been massively forced to use a kind of Big Bang introduction of technology. Therefore, we have tech-driven practices now in an unprecedented and time-pressured manner. We are learning, passing through massive learning curves for us to understand how things could be done remotely in a technological manner. Like we are now doing this conference. You are in Malaysia, most of you, I believe, and I am speaking from Glasgow, Scotland. But in the forthcoming post-pandemic world, a kind of normalization, kind of normal set of practices will be there. Normalization involves new ways of doing things. For that, we need to go through processes of cohesion, cognitive participation with partners, collective action, reflexive monitoring, in technological platforms, such as this Zoom. Hence, qualitative research activities can also be done in that way. I have a PhD student from Bangladesh. She wanted to go back to Bangladesh, but COVID came in. She was restricted traveling. It was difficult for her to do the planned field work in a remote village, for her to study farmers, rural, poor farmers, to understand how they are being shaped by SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, to understand how these farmers are being accountable in the service of SDGs. She couldn't do that because of the pandemic. Hence, she took alternative actions to do her research. I will talk about it very briefly. Before that, what is qualitative research, by the way? Because qualitative research is a question for people doing research in developing countries, because lots of people follow the methodology, quantitative research, hypothesis testing, Karl Popperian scientific methodology. Lots of people think that whatever the research you do, you have to follow that. In contrast, in big universities here in Europe, in business schools mainly, lots of people are doing qualitative research. We have large number of accounting PhD students here in Glasgow at the Adam Smith Business School. Most of them are doing qualitative research. What is this? It's about, as you see here, exploring meanings of the social world according to the people there, according to their understanding, according to their culture, according to their tradition. We gather their meanings in terms of their expressions, in terms of their body languages, in terms of their everyday practices, in terms of their relationships. So a qualitative researcher explores such an array of meanings of the social world. What do you mean by these meanings in that social world? Look at these things. People have their everyday lives. Their lives have a particular texture, particular view of everyday life of their living. It is graphical, it is traditional, it is historically rooted, culture bound, a texture and weave of everyday life of people. We can go there, we can be there, we can see the texture and weave of everyday life of people. in order for us to understand the meanings of the social world in which they live, and also their experiences through their relationships. They imagine how things should be happen. These experiences can be gathered by a qualitative researcher, by being there, by living with these people, by going by their talks, by going by their walks. These experiences and imaginings are the meanings of the social world as well. And also, as a qualitative researcher, we need to understand the significance, the importance of those meanings, the meanings these people generate. And also, not only that, we need to think about the bigger picture, the ways that social processes, institutions, meaning traditions, discourses, meaning ideas, or relationships work together. In other words, how things are going on, why there is no any violence, how things have been established as various practices. It could be an organization, it could be a community, it could be a village. You go there and try to understand those meanings. Therefore, qualitative research is exploring such an array of meanings of the social world. What we mean by texture of weave of everyday life. Some years back, I went to Sri Lanka to study microfinance in a rural village. Microfinance handled by poor women in that village. So I went there, and in my paper, which was published 2 years ago, I wrote, in order to show the texture and weave of everyday life of people, I wrote like this: these women had been and remain in convivial kinship networks as relatives, close friends and neighbors. And these relationships are the basis of their self-help group. In their traditional relationships, they shared cultural rituals for working and saving together. Now, gathered into formal groups and monitored through their prescribed accounting records, they are being disciplined to construct themselves as micro-entrepreneurs. The texture and weave of everyday life of microfinance women in that rural village. Their experiences, a microfinance borrower explained to me. As I said, sir, we are working hard and we are working for our own families. Groups are there for us to consider as a safeguard for securing loans. Nothing else. We are working for our own individual needs, individual lives. In the past, when we were not linked to any outsider, such as a bank, we were somewhat collective. and much more collaborative. Now, everybody is busy working for their loans to pay the next week's installment back. This is highly personal, though. We are linked to groups. As we all know each other, we cannot shoulder any responsibility to pay my loan, for example. Instead, we pay by ourselves and we work for ourselves. That means people are now so much thinking of their own circumstances, unlike in the past. This is data about their experiences and imaginings. So we speak to them, we listen to them, we record their sayings, expressions, opinions, ideas. That is data. This is a presentation of data, no quantitative analysis. But also we go on to understand the significance of the meanings of that people generate. So another microfinance borrower said, in a way, we have the same feeling like in the case of C2, a traditional local financial system. We trust each other and we all have a responsibility to make the payment. Our relations are more than business. They are our neighbors, relatives, or intimate friends. We share lots of things. Example, meals, tools, and equipment, firewood, labor, and happiness, and sadness, etc. Whatever we do, they know. Whatever we do, they ask about them. That is exactly our life. The significance of their meanings, the meanings they generate. This is data in qualitative research. But we need to be aware of what we are doing, what purpose we are trying to achieve. And also we move on to understand the ways that social processes, institutions, discourses, or relationships work, as I mentioned earlier. So we wrote in the paper as authors, because authors also provide data. This is an interpretive process. This is a sociological interpretive process of analysis in qualitative research. The author's subjective judgment, not objective judgments, author's subjective understandings are also part of qualitative analysis. Hence, in our paper we said, our analysis highlights three interrelated processes by which local Sri Lankan villages are integrated into the global financial system as sites of microfinance. The first process uses selected individual villages to animate microfinance projects at the local level, encouraging entrepreneurial activity and financial risk-taking by local women. The second corporatizes the traditional village, transforming it into a productive, high The third uses these structures to enforce compulsory savings and invigilate loans through assembly of a biopolitical account of the women's activities, which is used for mutual monitoring and for reporting to the bank. Together, these three processes ensure that individual women conform to the required norms of depositing, financial risk-taking, borrowing, and repaying in order to become bankable people, producing a new way of village life in a credit-driven market economy. Therefore, beyond the local level understanding, we sit back and reflect on the ways that social processes, institutions, discourses, or relationships work. That is called a theoretical generalization. Therefore, by studying one single village, by studying one single company, by studying one single community, you can generalize theoretically for us to understand what is happening in the world we are living in today. In this paper, we used a theoretical framework called biopolitics. Michel Foucault, French philosopher, Michel Foucault's biopolitics. Okay, why are we doing this? Quantitative researchers cannot do this. Quantitative researchers don't know what is going on in everyday lives of people. They don't know what are being happening at corners of the world. Therefore, our purpose is to celebrate richness, depth, nuance, context, multidimensionality, and complexity that quantitative researchers cannot achieve. Always, quantitative researchers look for the statistical significance. For example, finance researchers, but they don't know what the financial significance is. But today, we have a challenge because we are now approaching a post-COVID, post-pandemic world. For your qualitative research project to be successful, for your qualitative research projects to be entirely successful, you have to be there. You have to go there. You have to see everything for a long period of time. For example, I have another PhD student from China. She studied Chinese taxis, Uber-like Chinese taxis. They are called Didi in China. She, as a taxi rider, as a taxi passenger, she spent 6 months in taxis for her to understand how these taxi drivers are governed by a platform technology, Didi technology. For these taxi drivers' performance, their everyday jobs to be governed by comments, various kinds of reviews using that platform. She did an accountability PhD by studying that. Therefore, you have to be there. But under the pandemic, you can't do it to some extent. Hence, under the new normal, we need to limit now interactions and also traveling. But as my Bangladesh PhD student did, we can think of alternatives. My Bangladesh student I mentioned, she didn't go back to Bangladesh. Then we sat down and had to think about how we could do it alternatively. The answer to this problem is use technology. Use technology to conduct field work remotely. My PhD student had telephone conversations with farmers. As it was expensive for farmers, she arranged SIM cards for these farmers to use. These farmers then were prepared to have telephone conversations with her. And also, these farmers sent pictures through the WhatsApp or Viber. Pictures also data. Telephone conversations also data. The way these people speak, their body language, gestures, that is also data. And also, when it comes to talking with policymakers, government officers, she used Zoom-based conversations because these people are able to do that. Then she saw these people. She remotely interacted with these people and she recorded on Zoom with their permission. And also, she followed what is called now ethnographic methods, as opposed to ethnographic methods. One of qualitative methods is ethnography. Ethno means people. The science of understanding people. Ethnography. But the same thing can be done using the internet. Therefore, that is called netnography, netnographic methods, using the web-based technologies. Using web-based technologies, on the one hand, you can use web telecast, YouTube telecast, etc. You can listen to them over and over again. And also, you can see people's reviews, experiences, opinions, expressions on Facebook, various kinds of other social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and so on. So you can collect data using such web-based technologies. That is netnography. Therefore, my Bangladesh student supplemented her telephone, Zoom-based conversations with netnographic methods. And also, alternatively, you can go for more other ways of doing research, but qualitatively. For example, archival-based historical or contemporary studies. You can collect web-based newspaper articles or parliamentary Hansard reports or various kinds of old diaries or reports. They are all called archives. You can collect them. Thousands of archives can be collected from the internet. That facilities are now available. and also some databases there with such archives. Rather than counting the instances, occurrences quantitatively, you can follow qualitative, you can do qualitative research using these archives. You can meet people in reports. You can speak to people in records. You can see their relationships in records. And you can analyze using theoretical frameworks to understand, as I said at the beginning, an array of meaning of the social world. Therefore, there are alternatives for us to overcome the challenges we are going to face in the post-pandemic world. Hence, my conclusion today, or my overarching message for you today, is that qualitative researcher experiences situations such as the pandemic, and accordingly, he or she makes decisions as to how to do things under circumstances. That is how we need to manage the new normal. The new normal has given you the opportunity to find your own ways beyond textbook prescriptions on how to do research. In brief, qualitative researcher must find your own ways of doing the project, what is at your hand, according to these circumstances. According to the circumstances which will be created under the new normal. Thank you very much.